Hi, I'm Sean here at Frame Destination. We get a lot of questions about how to measure artwork in order to ensure the correct frame size is purchased. In this video, I'll show you our preferred measuring tool and clarify how to take accurate measurements, demonstrate how to measure prints, photos, or posters to avoid any mistakes in choosing frames or mats to showcase your art. If you're an artist, decorator, or DIY framer, you're likely familiar with the importance of accurate measurements. Whether you have a canvas you're fitting to stretcher bars or installing a wall in your home, you'll need to make sure you know the dimensions of your art or wall. You may already have your favorite measuring tape, but if not, let's take a look at the options. There are several different types of measuring tapes, and some are best suited for certain types of work. Here you see our preferred option, which is a contractor's measuring tape. Others that work well are standard wooden rulers, a flat architect's ruler. An old school yardstick is also fine to use if it's in good condition. Even a tailor's measuring tape is fine, although it may be a bit tricky to get it to lay flat. Whichever you use, it will need to extend and lay perfectly straight and flat for accuracy. This is one of our favorites when measuring frames or art. It's long enough to measure multiple sizes, it's rigid so it'll stay straight, and it helps do some of the work for us by identifying the main fractions of measurement. It labels the main ticks, or markings which represent the fractions of an inch. This is helpful because often you'll need to note those fractions if your item is measuring to those ticks. If you don't have these labels on your ruler or tape, let's understand what all the ticks mean so you can easily note them in your dimensions. The markings on the ruler start from the 1 inch mark are 1/16, 1/8, 3/16, 1/4, 5/16, 3/8, 7/16, 1/2, 9/16, 5/8, 11/16, 3/4, 13/16, 7/8, 15/16, and 1 inch. If the measurement is over 1 inch, simply use the number on the ruler and add the fraction. For instance, if it's 2 ticks past the number 3 tick, then the measurement is 3 1/8 inch. Generally, a standard photo or piece of art will come close to an inch or half-inch mark. So remember, the large number ticks are your inch marks, and in between the inch markings are the mid-size half-inch markings. A few other tips. Number 1, make sure you're using the correct unit of measurement. Generally, the dimensions of art or frames in a retail shop in the US or online will be stated in inches. Some rulers or measuring tape have inches marked on one side and centimeters on the other side. So just make sure you're using the side with inches if you have one of those. Number 2, note that some measuring tools have a little extra space at the beginning, so make sure you always start at the 0 mark. Line up the edge of your item at the 0 mark or where the ruler tick begins, not at the edge of the measuring tape. Number 3, have a pen and paper or digital device handy to write down the measurements as you take them. Before we get to the frame itself, there are a few other components that must be measured. The artwork and the mat if you're using one. The artwork is the focal point of the framed piece, and the artwork is what you base your frame size on. So you must first measure the correct part of the piece to be framed. The artwork size is the size of the image, not necessarily the paper on which the artwork is printed. For example, an 8 by 10 inch print from a photo lab will usually be 8 by 10 inches. But you might print an 8 by 10 at home on an 8.5 by 11 inch piece of paper. Therefore, the correct size is 8 by 10, not 8.5 by 11. Measure the width left to right and then the height, top to bottom. Be sure to include only the area you want to be seen. If it has a border around it that you like to hide, don't include that in the measurements. So I'll measure this piece of art now, starting with the width, 6.5. I'm going to note that on my phone, and then the height, 8 inches. Adding that note to my dimensions. With our precision custom framing capabilities, we can operate with the dimensions provided to the nearest 1/16. And there's a small amount of tolerance inside the frame. If you are between 1/16 increments, you can round up. Be sure to know which is your width and your height. We want to make sure we don't get those confused since they determine the orientation of the frame and the hanging hardware. When providing your artwork and frame dimensions to our customer service representatives, also indicate the width and the height, in that order. The last thing to consider is the depth, or the thickness of the item. If you have a flat piece of art or photograph you're framing, you typically won't need to note the measurements. But if you have a thick or three-dimensional piece of art, such as a comic book, canvas art, a textile, etc., that's more than 1/16 inch thick, it's a good idea to let us know so we can make sure the frame rabbets accommodated. We'll talk about rabbets later in this video. Now, what if you have a print with borders around the image and you want to preserve the border to make sure it's seen when the piece is framed? This may be the case if your art or poster is signed and numbered, or there's a title indicated you want to be able to see, or you just like the look of the border. Determine the amount of border you want to show, and if you want the border to be balanced on both sides and top and bottom as shown here. But be sure to include that area in your measurements. I want a balanced border all around, so I'll make a mark with my pencil out 1 inch on all sides, and then I'll take the width and height measurements, including that area on all 4 sides. If you're not including a mat, this is your artwork size, and subsequently your frame will be the same size as well. Or if you only want the bottom border to show as shown here, there's no wrong answer. It's really just up to your personal preference. All that's left is the fun part of choosing your frame style and color, and then pop these dimensions into our site. If you choose to include a mat board around your art in the framed piece, this can complicate the frame size a little. The mat board surrounds the artwork and adds extra space, so the frame must accommodate the size mat board you choose. Conveniently, on our website, you simply select the border size of the mat you desire, and the website will automatically calculate the frame inside perimeters for you. If you're not including a mat, the frame size will match the artwork size. But let's look at how to calculate those measurements if you need to yourself. There are 2 important measurements for a mat: the exact opening and the external size. The mat exact opening is the dimension of the hole cut in the mat. The size the mat is labeled is the opening size. However, there'll be slight variation when you measure with the tape measure, and here's why. A typical store-bought ready-made frame for an 8x10 photo may have a mat exact opening of 7.5 by 9.5. This is so that the mat will overlap the image by 1/4 inch on all 4 sides to hold the image down. For our frames that are smaller than 16 by 20, we reduce the overlap to 1/4, so it only covers 1/8 inch on all 4 sides. This can be especially useful for 5x7s, since covering 1/4 of an inch on both sides of a 5-inch photograph can be significant. Now on to the external size of the mat. The external size of the mat is the perimeter or the outside dimensions of the mat board. The mat's external size should match the dimensions of the glazing and the frame inside perimeters. For example, a mat board used to mount an 8x10 image in a frame that's 11 by 14 will have a mat external size of 11 by 14. Now, of course, the width of the mat's border will affect the external dimensions, and that can vary greatly, especially if you're cutting the mat yourself or ordering a custom frame kit. If you already have a matted piece of art or have a mat you're going to use, what you want to do is measure the mat while it's laid on the image as you'd like it to appear within the frame. If you don't have a mat yet, but let's say you know you want a mat that's 3 inches thick around your art. To determine the full size of your art plus mat, you'll take the mat border size of 3 inches and double it to get 6 inches, since the mat will be on both sides of your art. Then start your measurement from the 6-inch mark on your measuring tape. Hold down the measuring tape at the 6-inch mark on either the right or the left side of your art, and then extend it to the opposite edge. Repeat for the height. I bet you're wondering what in the world small furry creatures have to do with picture frames, Sean. I'm glad you asked. Now for more bonus tips on measuring, Let's take a look at the rabbet. The rabbet depth tells you how much room you have inside of the frame for your artwork, mat board, glazing, or mount board. Some frame moldings are not deep enough to allow a canvas or double mat or even an 8-ply mat to fit. At Frame Destination, almost all of our frames are deep enough for double mats. Any frame with a 3/8 inch rabbet or larger can handle a double mat. A 3/8 inch is the standard size content depth for most frames. And we have a long list of frames with a deep enough rabbet to accommodate canvas. See the link in the description of this video for the guides to those frames. And there you have it. Thank you for watching. Even though measurement math can seem fuzzy, we hope you can see a bit of method in the madness. And if not, no worries, because Frame Destination is here to help. For any questions or to order your custom frames, please call 972-479-1188, chat with us on our website, or email us at info@framedestination.com.